Hey guys, this is Jacolia of Jacolia Gems. Thank you for once again coming back home, family. For those of you that happen to be new here, I definitely hope that you hear something today that will persuade you to stay. Now, if you happen to be returning, welcome back home, family. Do me a favor, hit that like and subscribe button. And above all, talk to me in the comments. With that being said, let's jump straight into today's video. Now, I know I recently did a video on Hinduism and how their concept of God began to appear. I'm going to link that down below. I also began to do a video on the black gods of these nations. So I'm going to continue today just by reading short excerpts from the book Black God, an introduction to the world religions and their black gods. This is written by Dr. Supreme Understanding, part of the Science and Self series. Now, it begins to state, in India, black gods abound, besides those to whom statues of black stone are dedicated, of which more later on we have Shiva, Rahu, Vishnu, Tara, and Kali Deva. This is a quote by W. Crook, written in the Legends of Krishna. So if you guys remember, I began to talk about Kali when I was talking about the Kali Nango, Native Americans and the Key Congo. I talked about the goddess Kali when I began to talk about the coolies, or the feminine version Kali. I talked about Kali when we began to talk about the Indian princess that California was named after. I began to talk about Kali when I spoke about the East Indians coming into the Americans during slavery. And this is how the words Native American and Indians end up being conflated. So when we look at the Indian princess that Kali was named after, are we talking about a Native American or are we talking about a West Indian? And we know that this word means black in some instances. If you've ever been to India, then you know that you can find some of the world's darkest people there. And not just pockets of them, but millions of them. My late mother, had an eye doctor, and he was Darwinian. He was dark like my grandfather. I ain't gonna tell y'all what we call really dark men in our family, because, yeah, just one of the most beautiful complexions. And he began to tell my mom, he was like, yeah, us black people, we get mistreated everywhere. And the crazy thing is, somebody will look at me and be like, he's not black, he's an Indian. No, I'm black. My roots are Ethiopian. Let's continue. Many of them look like East Africans, while others of them look like Australian Aborigines. We know that these East Africans would be descendants of Cush, Nimrod, and some of them have the origin also of being from the tribe of Dan, and some say the tribe of Judah. But these East Africans specifically are from the same line as the Darwinians, which began to populate the Indus Valley. And when you have your Negroid Australia Aborigines, this is another pocket of Cushitic people. Some have had the woolly hair texture you typically associate with African people. The black people of India are everywhere because India was once a black civilization. So it makes sense that most of India's gods, at least those that are indigenous to the region, are dark-skinned themselves. These black gods were not limited to India, but were spread throughout all of Asia. Crook associated the complexion of the gods with the historical presence of black-skinned people. He wasn't alone. In Buckley's Cities of the Ancient World by Kenneth R. Mackenzie reports, from the woolly texture of hair, I am inclined to assign to the Buddha of India, the Fu He of China, the Somon Nakrom of the Seminoles, the Zaha of the Japanese, the Quetzalcoatl of the Mexicans, the same, and indeed an African, or rather Nubian origin. Now we know that Nubian is a derogatory term for Cushitic people. We also know that this has become a word that has been associated with African American people, and I want to tell you that some of you are Cushites. A lot of us are not. We could begin to see the Cushitic markers among the sons of Ephraim. We do have to know that a lot of these people lived, dwelled, and married amongst one another. So part of the Yoruba have an oral tradition of coming from Nimrod, whereas the greater part of them have an oral tradition, descendants as the sons of Ephraim, who were pushed into the Assyrian captivity in 7022 and then they end up fleeing the Spanish Inquisition and coming down into Mali, Mauritania, and Morocco. And after they were there, they entered back into West Africa. Line upon line, precept on precept, here a little, there a little. So this is why you would see some Cushitic markers amongst some African Americans. Let's continue. The Black Gods of India, an introduction to Hinduism. Hinduism is the most widespread religious tradition in India, with over 9 million adherents. Because Hindus don't typically proselytize or attempt to convert others, Hinduism isn't a widespread in other parts of the world. So you see this? So if you see somebody picking up on Hindu customs, it's not because they are typical for trying to convert, as you see amongst the Jews. So tell me, how did this influence end up getting amongst black people? So India and Hinduism kind of go hand in hand. In fact, India was once known to Westerners as Hindustan, and the words of Hindu and Indian were considered synonymous. See, this is when they were called Hindus. What do Hindus believe? Many things, after all. Hinduism, like many other religions, was born from a wide variety of indigenous traditions being blended together under a common umbrella. There's also an undeniable influence from the West. Not from the West as in modern Europe or America, but the ancient West, the Caucasus. Now, I want to begin to tell you guys something, and I was going to hold off on this. And I'm still not going to go in depth because there's some articles that I want to read with this. When we begin to look at Canaan, we see that he was cursed. There have been some people to make the assertion to say that Canaan was cursed with leprosy. They began to justify this by one of the scripture in the book of Leviticus that talks about a leprous house and how the priest has to treat it. And some begin to say this is a molded house. Others begin to say that this is a house that's laden with sin and has become leprous and have become a curse. Now, far-fetched, right? We begin to look at their justification with the prophetess Miriam kicking against Moses' marriage to an Ethiopian woman, and the Most High turned her skin white. And Aaron and Moses begged him to heal her. We see that this is the curse of leprosy. And when there's no scab in the flesh, the skin turns white and the hair becomes blonde and it does not turn back, then the person is now considered clean to walk amongst other people, right? But not amongst their lepers, but they are considered unclean. When we begin to look into the ancient Amorites, the ones that founded Turkey, the ones that come from the Caucasus Mountain, these would be called your Caucasians. Stay with me. What if I begin to tell you that the descriptive markers of these ancient Amorites was pale skin, blue eyes, blonde hair, and at times they would appear with red hair. And they were from the Caucasus. We have to begin to do some dissecting. So these would be Caucasian people. Caucasian people and European people are not the same people. Caucasian people are descendants of Ham. We have to know this. We have to study history. Let's further begin to touch in on this just a little bit more. We begin to look into Turkey, and you see these people, and there is some similarities in DNA to the Edomite or the world convert Jews. There's some similarity in DNA for the lighter Arabs, the Edomite Arabs, who began to mix and mingle. And the reason being that their DNA is found in the Levant, found in the Mediterranean, found in all of these regions is because this is where they immigrated from. And then they went into the Caucasus, into parts of Asia, to create the Han dynasty in China, to progenerate the Caucasus, to establish these land masses. We have to remember that the Cushitic people started civilizations just about everywhere. Line upon line, precept on precept. A little after 2000 BC, boards of Indo-European speaking people came into India. Now, some people began to say that this is the Aryan invasion, and others began to deny it. Yet there's a lot of proof that these people from the Caucasus began to invade. Would this not show truth of the Amorites? Did not a branch of the Amorites invade ancient Egypt and juxtapose them, not juxtapose them side by side, and basically kick them out and uprooted them from Egypt? And so the relics that we see in Peru predates that of ancient Egypt, because where did these ancient Egyptians go if they weren't in Egypt? And I know some of y'all going to say Lower Egypt. Well, where is that? These Hykso-Amorites have a history of coming into places and taking over the land masses. I don't know. Maybe we don't know what we're talking about. Then came in small waves, but eventually toppled indigenous rule and took over. So the Amorites came in to take over from the Cushitic people, the Darwinians, and the Bantu, the indigenous people that were already there. This sounds familiar. Y'all don't think so? White people with blonde hair and blue eyes, or lighter complexions than indigenous nations coming in to take over with their own religion. What once was before. I don't know. This is known to the historians as the Aryan conquest of India. When this happened, it wasn't just a military takeover. These people also transformed the religious and political philosophy of India. This is when many of the indigenous black gods were turned into black demons. Now, let's look into the etymology of the word demon. When we began to look into the Near East, which this was, demon was not necessarily an adversary until, I believe, Second Temple Judaism, when the Jews became Hellenized in their customs. We need to be aware of the fact that Shad, which consists of the Shin and the dialects in Hebrew, comes together to create the root of these demons. And these are specifically protective deities of other nations. So we also have to stop the false assertion that other nations don't have their own gods, don't have their own protections, don't have their own rituals, that other nations were not given to their own gods when they were divided amongst the 70 or the 72, depending on if you're reading the Hebrew or the Greek translation, sons of Elohim at the Tower of Babel, when the world was on one system and on one accord. We have to begin to know that they had their own worship system. And so demons ended up becoming to mean specifically wicked, when it could have been applicable to a malevolent, benevolent, or just neutral or benign spirit. Now we'll begin to look at the Great Deluge in the time of Noah. We have to begin to line this up and know that Raphaim took place. It says that there were great men, men of renown in those days and after. It's a extra biblical, well, outside of the canon, but biblical belief that the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim continue to live on and to become demons. This is talked about in depth in the first two books of Enoch. This is talked about in ancient Near Eastern texts, when we begin to even look about how the biblical concept starts to break down demons, and the language mean is Rephaim. When we line up the book of Job, Psalms, and Proverbs, we begin to see, as I have stated before, that this goes in congruency with the first chapter and the first few verses of Genesis, when it begins to talk about that flood. And I know some people believe it's a reach, but if you look at Psalms 104, if you look at Job 38, Job 41, if you look at Proverbs, when wisdom begins to talk about before the creation of the earth, when you go into the Mishnah and you read on the oral tradition that the Israelites began to write and to create while they were in Babylonian captivity, while they were in Grecian captivity, they began to expound on these concepts even more. In their place, there were now white gods. Wait a minute. So these Aryans from the Caucasus brought in white gods. And we see that these historians that I was reading from correlated the complexion of the gods with the complexion of the peoples. Okay? In fact, an entire social system known as the Varna or color system was introduced so that dark-skinned people could occupy India's lowest social caste. What does this sound like? While the Aryans and their descendants were, by God's law, now the top of the social order, those who did not, quote-unquote, mix into the new system became, quote-unquote, untouchables. Y'all. But think about it. There's no way you can simply take over someone's land and kick out all of their old gods. Cortez tried this with the Aztecs in 1519. Why they making associations between these people? Now, the Aztecs are ancient Babylonians and Assyrians, and they nearly killed him and his entire army. Instead, those who hope to take over successfully and with the least amount of rebellion possible will instead keep some of the old gods. This is called idol synchronization, y'all. Have we not talked about this? Is this not what is seen amongst the Israelites when they were in ancient Egypt, when they were in Babylon, Syria, Persia, Greece, Rome? So when they came into the Indus Valley, where the Cushitic and Hebraic people were, they took their black gods and replaced them with white gods. Does this not sound familiar? But they allowed them to keep some of their black gods. And we see this today and continued in the diaspora when we have the Igbos, the Akan, the Yoruba, so on and so forth, in Haiti, in Cuba, Dominican Republic, Brazil, Puerto Rico, Guatemala, Venezuela, all of these places, Louisiana, Mississippi, the black church, still believing in their black God while synonymously venerating these white gods. We see this happening in the Spanish Inquisition. We see this in the Muslim rule. We see this like amongst black people everywhere. We cannot deny history. Idol synchronization. They'll turn some of them into bad gods or villains while raising others up, as long as they can control how the god is described. This is what the Aryans did with Krishna, one of the most prominent gods of Hinduism. Did you know in Hinduism, when a deity like Vishnu descends to earth to take on a human form like Krishna, this is called an avatar? Wait a minute, doesn't this sound familiar? Doesn't this sound familiar, y'all? I'm gonna let y'all do your own deciphering right there. The Sanskrit word is usually translated as incarnation, but it could also be rendered as manifestation. Let's talk about this, right? Incarnation, the incarnate, the pre-existence. Is that not taught amongst many about Yeshua? Now, in the oral tradition, they began to teach that his name, that the name of the Messiah, the Mashiach, was already present in the beginning. We also see that there's a concept in the Ugaritic, the Akkadian, the Semitic teachings that El, the Father, does not come off of his throne, but he extends himself through his arm, which would be the Yod, which we see play out in the Paleo Hebrew. And then we would see the 5 fingers, which is the root word for manifest. Mani means hand. Fest, festival, feast. Do we not ask that the deity come sit and sup with us in Hebraic concept? We begin to purge, purify, cast down, and destroy. Anoint the temple, make the sacrifice, get in your linen. Do whatever things it says for you to do. For the deity to find worthy, whether it be Old Testament custom, or you purging yourself out as temple, so that he can come and sit and rest and dwell and sup, to be manifested. Well, we see that the yod would be the arm, and the 5 finger would be the hand. I'm reminded of the late great Bishop Norman Wagner. This the churchy side of me, y'all, the apostolic side of me. He began to preach a message that even as an Israelite, I will never forget. He broke down manifestation. And now church people think that is such a wicked concept. But he broke that down and said that the Most High is literally about to take his hand and dance on your situation. Because what do you do at a festival? You dance. And dancing is a sign of manifestation. And Mani is represented by that 5. And the hand of the Most High would present itself as a deliverer to the Israelite people. And we see that when we entered out and we were in the wilderness, what did Miriam do? She sang songs, and she had a tambourine. And the women danced and the women celebrated. We see the same concept kept today, but it has been sexualized and misunderstood by cultures and deemed demonic. And the reason being is because much like the Israelites, come on, Holy Spirit, and line them up, when they left out of the wilderness and they started to worship El Shaddai, they got weary and made a golden calf. So you see this idol synchronization come into that which is supposed to be holy. So when you see the carnivals, these things are rooted in emancipation stories of slaves. And this was their indigenous customs, their Mardi Gras, their carnivals to celebrate. And when these Mardi Gras was created in France amongst the French Revolution, idol synchronization began to come up. When St. Patrick's Day, when Carnival, like all of these things were Hebraic and concepts began to carry on celebratory markers of the manifestation of the hand of the Most High. We began to look into the red hand of Ulster in Ireland, where they say that they are the tribe of Judah, is represented by the 5 hand of Zerah. We've talked about it before. And in their oral tradition, they say that it's represented by the 5 hand because the Irish people were guided out of captivity and warfare by the hand of the Most High. They began to say that their hand is red because they're from the tribe of Judah, descendants of the twins of Tamar, the oldest. And we know that when we began to look at the birth of twins in the Hebraic culture, as seen among Jacob and Esau, the oldest hand is tied in red. We begin to look into the Hamza, that hand. I mean, many people say the hand of Fatima. We know that Arabs are Hebrews. We need to realize that this hand was seen in the temple of the Israelites, and it represented the hand of the Most High. And it had Hebrew written in it. and that it will have an eye in it as well. To speak about the eye of him watching over his people. To speak about the 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of the angels who watch over the earth realm, taking the report back to El. To talk about the eye when Mashiach ben Yosef began to say that if your eye is full of darkness, then your body will be full of darkness. So when we begin to look at these concepts, we have to realize that New Age doctrine, Hinduism, like all of these things were first rooted in biblical Hebraic nature, and we went back to Babylonian practices via the influence of people with light skin and blonde hair. This concept is most popular in Hinduism and Sikhism, but can be found in other traditions where a transcendent God takes on an earthly form. We begin to see the dialogue between Abraham, the deity, and Tumalek that appeared as men. These were border crossers. He prepared a sacrifice. He told his wife to prepare food. Krishna is one of the most important gods in Hindu pantheon. He is the central figure in Mahabharata, one of the most important Hindu epics, and is regarded as an incarnation of the supreme god Vishnu by millions of Hindus everywhere. Krishna is almost always depicted with black skin. When he is not, he is depicted with blue skin. But it remains understood that this is only symbolic of his true black color. Now, y'all remember the movie Avatar? What was their skin depicted as? Blue. But why is he black? If you Google why is Krishna black, you might come across the following explanation, which is based entirely on Hindu scripture. Once mother Yashoda called Krishna and asked him, "Darling Krishna, people doubt who you belong to." Krishna: "To you, of course, mother Yashoda. But people say all sorts of things. They point out that your father and I are extremely fair in complexion. You are dark in complexion. Why is it so?" Krishna: "Mother, it is because of you. When I was born, I was too fair like you. However, it was pitch black at that time. You were sleeping away merely. I was sleeplessly turning sides the whole night. As a consequence, the darkness of the night stuck to me and I became black." Krishna's simple mother could never disbelieve her son. She stretched out her hand and squeezed him to her chest. The same question was put to him insultingly by Duryodhana, the villain of the epic Mahabharata. The following dialogue takes place there. Duryodhana: "Nobody can say for sure who your parents are. If Nanda Baba and Yashoda are your parents, then why are you so black?" Krishna: "I am black." And then in parentheses it says Kala. Kaala. So for the people that says there's no correlation between Kala, Kali, and black, there you go. Because I have come as your end. Kal. Kaal. However, when Krishna beloved Radha asked him the same question, his reply was markedly different. Radha asked Krishna: "My dear, even though you are so beautiful, why are you black?" Krishna: "Dear Radha, actually, I was extremely fair. However, I have become dark only to enhance your fair beauty, which is all more magnificent by contrast with my dark complexion." Some Bhaktas speculate that Krishna always lives in the eyes of the gospess Vridavana. It is the black coal or kajal of their eyes that has blackened him. Or perhaps he is dark because he absorbs all the negativity in the hearts of his worshippers. Does any of this make sense to you? Does it offend you? Does it seem like there are some obvious truths that have been twisted beyond recognition? If it seems twisted, it's because it is. I'll explain. Krishna was a black god. Like many other black gods, he is often depicted as blue skin, which is in ancient art considered synonymous with black. He is depicted as black because his myth was based on the black gods of the indigenous black people of India. Y'all, when we begin to look at the Israelites and they wear these blue fringes, the color is originally like a violet color, which we know is a shade of purple. When we look at the movie, The Color Purple, it should place us in the mind of the ancient Phoenicians. And we also know that the ancient Phoenicians were a Hamitic people. It's important to know that Phoenicia was also inhabited and co-founded by the tribe of Dan. So all of these colors were always in correlation with black people. He was depicted as black because his myth was based on black gods of the indigenous black people of India. But once whites, ancient India and Aryans, came to power, they stole those gods from the traditions they came from and repurposed them to fit their needs. Krishna is probably the best example of this, but this happened throughout the world. To understand all this, we need to firsthand know how we can be so sure that Krishna was indeed a black god. The name Krishna itself means black. Krishna was also known by the name Kanahaya. Cain Haya. Literally, Cain Haya, y'all. Cain, K-A-N, and then Haya, H-A-Y-A, which literally means black man, y'all. Really? Do we not know that the Canaanites, descendant from Canaan, who was originally born one way, according to some, and then turned into another? And what does the Haya mean in Hebrew? Is it not the root? To bring into existence the breath of life? Okay. The Prophet Muhammad may have recognized Krishna was revered in India as a black god because a hadith or oral tradition records him saying, and I quote, "There was a prophet of God in India who was black-skinned, Aswad al-Lan, and his name was Kahan." And the words Kahan and Kahanhaya are believed to be related. K-A-H-A-N, Canaan. Something that he learned in his travels across Africa and Asia, Lieutenant Colonel James Todd connected the dots between Krishna or Kenya, the same as Kanhana. Isn't Kenya in East Africa? And the Egyptian Ramesses, whom he associated with the Greek god Apollo. Then we just line up ancient Egypt. And if we look at the time of Ramesses, we will see this in the biblical narrative. And then the Greek god Apollyon, the destroyer. And we know that Shiva is known to be the destroyer. Diodorus informs us that Cain was one of the titles of the Egyptian Apollo or Ramesses, and that this common contraction for Kenya, the color of the Hindu Apollo, is a dark cerulean blue, or called Nila. Hence, he is occasionally called Nila Nata, or the blue god. Nila, the Nile. The Nakolic people of Africa are known to be some of the darkest skinned people ever, as well as Nath. Y'all, Shem, Nath, which also means the black god. So Shem, means black as well? You don't say. And he is invariably represented with the lotus in his hand. And like the Apollo of the Nile, Kenya is depicted with human form and eagled head, one of the common hieroglyphic deities of Egypt. Y'all see how they lining up? We also need to be aware that there was several Nubian Cushitic dynasties of ancient Egypt. These are just pure facts. Talk connects these black gods to the Buddhist pantheon as well. Remember the Buddhist that I was talking to in my Uber ride, who is from Sri Lanka, and he began to talk about the Moors of Sri Lanka, but talk about the Buddhism in Sri Lanka. We have to realize that there are English words that directly translate to Sanskrit. We also have to know that there are several Sanskrit words that can directly translate to Latin, to Hebrew, and to Portuguese. Shamnath and Shivnath, the black divinity, are the common epithets of Krishna, which name likewise means black. It is curious that the contemporary and relative Neem Nath, the 22nd high priest of Buddha, was also designated from his black color, Arish Nema. Y'all, we're gonna look at this Neem. Now we'll begin to look at one of the supposed wives of, oh my God, her name was Nama. She was a descendant, I believe, of a Canaanite. I'm gonna have to not pause here, but I'm gonna have to brush up on this. But Nama, Naamah. Did they say she was the wife of Noah as well? She was a descendant of Canaanite. So this is how some people suppose that this end up being able to happen after the Great Deluge. We also can see that Nama was the name of a female demon in some traditions. We also need to look at Arishat, Arisht, that puts me in the same mind of Ashereth as well. In other worlds, all these gods had black in their names between Egypt's Ramses, the Greek Apollo, Hinduism, Krishna, and Buddhism named Nath. And we also need to look at Neith. Neith was an Egyptian goddess. So was Anet. Time suggests that the common thread is black skin, but who came first and where did they come from? Where did these black gods come from? Lieutenant Todd asks, are we to bring forth from the Nile or to send them there from the Indus? In other words, did these black gods come from black Egypt, or did these traditions begin in black India and work their way until the Nile Valley? Either way it go, they said that both civilizations were black. The answer seems to be a little more complicated than that. Why? These black gods are found everywhere. In Volume 2 of Anna Pius, Godfrey Higgins writes, the originals of the gods have been of black race, and the class of followers of Krishna after the black race have become improved into the shape in which we find him. That by the handsome black males constantly uniting with the most handsome black females, their progeny increased in beauty till it arrived at the degree of perfection which we found in Krishna. Now this is a Hebraic concept. When we began to look at the Levites, they had to be fine. They had to be flawless. If anyone was found with any type of flaw amongst them, they could not serve as a Levite, because beauty was seen as a direct correlation as your proximity to the deities. It was looked at as being considered more clean. This, y'all, I just read that. Look into the book of Leviticus. It begins to tell you what disformities people cannot have when they're making sacrifices. Higgins goes on to propose that the world's first government did originally consist of this race, and that in the East, the entire population consisted of this race. It continues black. And who are from the East? Hello. Think about it, what that means for a minute. In the West, on the other hand, Higgins said that these black gods mixed with whites. What's Western civilization over there? Rome, Greece, Turkey. What's Eastern civilization? And out of that, you get the Septuagint. You get the Greek New Testament. You get the Roman Catholic Church. You get the Western stream even of Islam. In the East, this is where you get the Aleppo Codex, the Aramaic interpretations of the scripture written by and interpreted by Polycarp, who was martyred because he began to continue on the Jews' oral traditions. Some of these things that people call fallacies, our apostles were killed for correctly interpreting the Hebrew text and not leaving out our stories of Exodus, not leaving out our rituals and our prayers and our sacrifices. And so we see how this begins to take place. And then when you have your Eastern stream, this is also more strict, more Hebraic, Semitic, whether it's Islam or the version of Judaism, the version of Christianity that you see. They adhered more to the origins of their worship. And you guys see this just keep on proving everything. So let's continue to read. In other words, some of the people who look like white folks worshiping black gods may have originally been black folks. And this is where you get your white passing. Your mulattoes, your mulattas, your mulatti. This is where you get people that look like Channing Tatum and Pink. The young lady that plays Spencer on Pretty Little Liars. Or your Kates. This is where you get that. So the next time y'all see a white woman that's all hourglass shaped, full lips, and she got some of them features, you may want to check her ancestry. He can say that there's no way to explain the myths of the black gods in Europe and China. Then I began to make some correlation between China and the Hamites too. Then by supposing it carried by persons whose colors has become changed by mixture with the white inhabitants. Higgins concludes, we have daily experience of the black races by this process becoming white, but we have no example of the white races going back to the black. An intriguing theory, to say the least, but there's quite a bit of support, as you'll find in part 2 of When the World Was Black. Krishna raises to prominence. Let's go back to Krishna. Krishna was originally not a god of great significance, but he was selected to become one of the great gods of Hinduism under the Aryans, as S.N. Sadasivan explains in A Social History of India, and I quote, originating from the pastoral tribes of Kathawats, the Krishna cult, through a social religious literature, has integrated itself with the similarities or parallel cults all over the country. Mayanavan, Mayan, or Krumayin era, meaning black color. Canaan, y'all, it's spelled Kannan. So when Cain left the Garden of Eden, and he went east of Eden would have been this area. When we began to look at the Kenites, a branch of them was also tent-dwelling people, and they found favor amongst the Most High. And we will see that a branch of the Kenites had their own priesthood and they were found to be holy, etched out, set aside to the deity. We need to look into our Bible. Wow. Canaan, who was the clan god or fertility deity of cowherds of the south, was united with the magical child Krishna of the Bhagavatas, Gopinath, Vira Swara, or Muralidhara of Mathura. Cowherders, y'all. Cowherders. In other words, there were many black gods who were revered across India, and these local deities were merged with the myth of Krishna whenever the Brahmin priesthood found it possible. Okay. In the Black Untouchables of India, Reclaiming Our Cultural Heritage, Indian scholar V.T. Rashikar writes, and I quote, "They promoted and popularized a black tribe hero, Krishna, and elevated him to godhood, to who back the Suduras and other masses." Sounds familiar? As you'll see in the volume 4 of the Science of Self series, when black populations and conquered and suppressed their new rulers will adopt some of their indigenous icons and repurpose them to promote the new state religion. This is what happened with Krishna, Kali, and several other black gods and goddesses throughout the ancient world. There's even a black revelation. Y'all, there's even a black revelation from Palestine, who later became the poster child for the Western slave trade. Imagine that. This was almost an hour. Wow. I really hope y'all learned something on today. Again, this is me reading excerpts from The Black God, an introduction to the world's religion and their black gods, written by Dr. Supreme Understanding, part of the Black Science of Self series. For more of these books, you can go to www.thescienceofself.com. This is in the Library of Congress control number. I definitely suggest getting this book. The foreword was written by Bishop Henry McNeil Turner. Okay, y'all, line up on line, precept on precept. Here a little, there a little. Anything that has been read has been done so for educational purposes only. Free, fair usage. Bye.